Hello, this is Carl369, or if going on YouTube, it's Conspiracy Carl. But yeah, anyway, right. I've got to put this obviously out as for entertainment purposes only, and shouldn't be taken as seriously. Okay, but so I'm gonna have to put it in a story form, right? Because that's how it is, obviously, for entertainment purposes only. Right, so this boy called Carl, yeah, in 2019 he was so fit, he could jog, he could, he's fully active. He used to do boxing in his youth and things like that, and he grew up very active, done lots of walking, cycling, things like that. Very, very active. He had an asthma pump given into him in his sort of, I don't know, 20s or whatever. Never really used it. He probably, even if once a year, maybe once every 3 or 4 years, but he never got out of breath. This is the point I'm trying to make. If he did, he could use a paper bag. That's how minor it was. Anyway, so this is how the story continues, okay? So, Carl, one day, there was this TV thing that came out that made everybody worry. Everybody really, really scared. And everybody so scared they couldn't even see their own family members. And they had to wait in these big long queues before they could even get food and stuff like this. And then, by magic, the powers that be brought out this special thing that the people must have. Okay, so as the story goes. So anyway, but Carl, he had a head on his shoulders and a good brain in that head, and he, along with lots of other people, should I say, as well, and he, along with lots of other people, he really, he was adamant that he didn't want this done. He was so adamant, because he could see through lots and lots of deception, and so, in that sort of sense, he was adamant that he did not want this, certain treatment. But anyway, family members, because they were sorry, I'm sort of skipping the story. Yeah, so earlier on, before this, Carl's parents, they'd separated, but they both got married again, and with different partners, and lived at opposite ends of whatever country they lived, and so they were happy. But anyway, this thing come on, and everybody was so terrified, but there was a few people that were saying that this is not real. You don't believe this story, please. And they were telling them facts and then else, and they were, no, you listen, they have said this, the uppers, the lords, the uppers, the powers that be, they've said this, they've said that. They wouldn't lie, they wouldn't mislead the public, they're not like that. Don't be stupid. You must have it. If you don't have it, boy, then you're not coming to see me again or my partner. And then the other parent was, not so, but she was, if you don't have it, Carl, I'm sorry, but I can't come and see you. I'm not having it. I'm sorry, but I can't come and see you, and because I'm very ill as well. And the other partner was like, well, I'm sorry, but we can't come over if you don't have it done. We ain't coming over. We can't come over. You can't see us if you don't have it. So of course, both of his parents, which were now of 4, because both were remarried, so there was 2 on each side, both were, going on and on and on and on at Carl. Now, Carl was, like I say, adamant that he didn't want this treatment, shall we say. But then Carl had, he had enough. He got to a point where the constant regurgitation of everybody pointing fingers and saying, oh, if you don't have it done, this was his loved ones that he most loved and cherished, and they would not believe Carl. They would not believe him. you know, because of past labels it had been given by other so-called professionals, the same sort of professionals that were doing the, you know, this scary thing that was out, yeah? So anyway, Carl was so adamant they didn't want it done, and the arguments continued and continued and continued, and they were getting quite feisty. So Carl thought, you know what, right, okay, I know exactly what it does, so I'm going to have it regardless, yeah, I'm going to have it, and Carl himself was like, right, okay, I'm going to have to be this sacrificial lamb, yeah. And he pondered on this for quite a long while before he come to this decision to be this sacrificial lamb, so that way he could show people, even if it meant giving up his own life, you know, because at the time it deemed that important, you know, that if he didn't, he would never ever see his parents again. So, of course, he didn't want this anyway, but he went to the place where he had the treatment to go and have the treatment. Now, just say, for instance, this was in the year, just say 2020, yeah? Right. So just say it was in the year 2020, right? So I'm just trying to walk the throat. So yeah, it was in the year 2020, and he had the treatment. Now, literally, straight after the treatment, literally, he could feel like a rush of, how he could only explain it in his story, shall I say, you know, as of poison entering his body, because it was like, not heat, but it was a burning sensation, but it was going all over his arm from where it had been put in. It was going all over his arm, and he could feel it entering him as if he'd been poisoned. So anyway, but by the time he left the place where he had it done, he got back to his, and he couldn't move off the sofa for nearly 2 to 3 weeks, gasping for oxygen, dizziness, all the symptoms that a person would have normally gone to the hospital. The one thing that stopped Carl from going to the hospital was he had a pet that he was very connected with. So Carl, because he didn't want to leave his pet, didn't go to the hospital. He'd rather, you know, if that was going to happen to him, he was going to spend the last of his time with his pet, and looking after his pet, and that was his commitment at that time. Because, like I say, nobody come and see him because he didn't have this, you know. So yeah, so anyway, that was his thing, and this happened to Carl, that he couldn't eat. And this went on for such a long time, and then these sort of symptoms slowly disappeared. But Carl noticed something, that when he was using like magnets and things, neodymium magnets, apparently these are the strongest magnets in the world or something. But anyway, when Carl was using these on the same place where he had the treatment, the magnets were sticking to the same area where he had the treatment. Right, then after a few years, like I say, the side effects, or what should have sent him to hospital, but it was quite fortunate because a lot of people that Carl had spoken to, or Carl had got messages and things like that from, because he was on the internet, yeah, Carl was receiving mail and from people that had passed over because they had these same effects, and had to go to places for further treatment, and didn't come back again. So Carl, because he had this bond with animals and things like that, that sort of was his saving grace in a way. Anyway, this goes on. So a couple of years after, when people were satisfied that Carl had took his treatment and they were satisfied. And, Carl still hadn't seen two of the parents, lived far away. No, I hadn't seen them. But, one of the parents on that side was getting ill. And, they did have to come down to Milton Keynes and things to see grandchildren. But Carl still didn't get to see them. But anyway, that's another story, but that's another another book. But anyway, so Carl went on to meet somebody that thought that was the right friend or partner or whatever. Anyway, this person turned out to be very, very volatile. But within a couple of years after having the treatment, say 3 to 4 years after having the treatment, Carl started to get really, really, really ill. His left leg swollen up to twice the size of his right leg. And Carl couldn't breathe. It was the same symptoms as what he had experienced a few years back after the treatment, apart from the leg swelling. So anyway, Carl stuck with this for a couple of years before going to the doctors to get help, because it just wouldn't go. The breathing, the struggling to breathe, it just wouldn't go. And Carl was a bit apprehensive to go to the same sort of places for help when he knew that it was them places that made him ill in the first place in his mind. So he was very, very apprehensive on going. Anyway, so Carl didn't go for a couple of years, and then when he did go, he got diagnosed by a doctor with the wrong thing. So Carl was treated for a further 2 years, so from 2022 to 2024, he was treated with something else, a lower form of what he actually had. Now, these people, apparently, they knew exactly what happened, and I'll tell you why after. Right, okay, the last chapter that is. Right, so anyway, so what happened was, Carl found out that he was terribly, terribly ill, and he had this irreversible damage to his breathing, and then he gets a phone call. I don't know if it was roughly the time that Carl found out, or just before Carl went to get, a second opinion to find out what was wrong with him. Then he gets a phone call from one of the parents who lived very, very far away that he hadn't seen since. He had phone calls, but he hadn't seen them, for many a year, since before this thing was announced to everybody around the whole place, around the whole world. It was announced to everybody. Anyway, hadn't seen them parents, even though they'd been down past his sort of area, or up past his area, he still didn't get to see them. Anyway, that's, like I say, another story. But like I say, it's anyway, he didn't get to see them, and then he gets a phone call from one of the parents saying, "Oh yeah, you won't believe what's happened to me. I had that treatment and it only gave me blood clots. And I'm on treatment now for the rest of my life because of that bloody thing." And the Carl is thinking, what? And you was pressurising Carl that much to have this bloody thing, yet he still hadn't seen you in all that time. And the other parents as well had pressurised Carl as well. But I'm just saying, this is one parent, but he'd got ill and got blood clots, but live out the rest of his life, so he's got, God knows how many years in front of him, relatively unscathed really, apart because of, this, whatever treatment he had in his area was different. So, treatments would give out in different areas, so that way the not so clever people or not so clever beings that lived on this place couldn't put two and two together. Yeah, and they had trouble with that. Carl had an insight where he could smell it before it come out the person's mouth, basically. So he had this, he was born with it. So I don't suppose he thought it as an ability, or he just could see it as he knew, and other people knew, and why couldn't other people, or the other three quarters at least, see this? But anyway, like I say, so the other person rang Carl up and said, "Oh yeah, I nearly died, and I'm sort of saying no to him now." No, I'm sorry. I should have listened to Carl. I really am sorry. I do really apologise, and I'm sorry for pressurising you and making you have, this thing. And Carl didn't get any of that, no, because some people in Carl's life, from this story, they're they're different, so they wasn't as as empathetic as Carl was. But anyway, this story carries on. So right, so Carl's getting gradually worse, but it's galloping. What he's been told he had is going so fast. It's like it's on a fast train, and it should be on a donkey. Yeah, but the whatever treatment he had, should I say? Yeah, it's going at an extraordinary rate through the stages very, very fast, whereas normally it would take, at least 10 years, yeah, and then maybe longer if the person catches it, and does what Cole's doing anyway. But like I say, anyway, it was going and going very, very quickly. So Cole then got letter because he'd been getting further treatment where he had to go to one of these big places. I believe they were called hospitals or something in the book. But anyway, yeah, so Carl had to go to this place that they call hospitals or something. And he went there for further testing for these things that could be wrong with him. And he had a severe breathing, lung breaking down disease that was unrepairable. And anyway, Carl knew another 5 people that all had the same problem, that all erupted exactly the same time as his did. And yet the only one thing that Carl had in common with these people, now bearing in mind, one of the people that Carl knew was in a part of the forces, they call it a paratrooper. So he was super, super fit. Anyway, he got the same thing. Now, like I say, and then 4 other people that Carl knew. Now, the only one thing that Carl had in common with these people, because Carl had a totally different lifestyle, they all did, some were super fit, some were fit, some were not great, but anyway, Carl was fit, and, but like I say, they all sort of come at the same time. They all got very, 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 very ill. The only one thing they had in common was the place they had the treatment. The one place specifically they had this treatment. So, like I say, and then, so then Carl's going to the hospital, right, and before this, Carl then, like I say, because Carl's got to have these scans to see how fast this thing is progressing. And like I say, it's like it's going like downhill with a lead wheeled barrel, and the car was in it, and that's how fast it's going, right? Now Carl stopped, like I say, the things that should be making it, go faster, so he's trying his best. But anyway, so then Carl goes shopping one day to the place, literally just over the road, a stone throw, and I mean a stone throw. I don't mean half of a mile. I don't mean quarter of a mile. I mean a few feet. I'm talking 4 lorries, probably. 4 lorries distance is. Carl can't manage 1 lorry without having to stop. So Carl has to have something now that he can push to hold himself to help him breathe while he's pushing it. Right? Now, bearing in mind, like I said, before the time that Carl had the treatment, he was physically fit. Carl could jog, a couple of mile and a couple of mile back, he's physically fit. Like I say, because of the childhood and the things he'd done in his past, not the silly things, but the sensible things. He'd exercised his body quite a lot. So, in a sense, he was physically fit, yes. So, like his friend who also was a para. Well, anyway, like I say, Carl goes over to Tesco's one day and he sees one of the people that used to work in the little treatment place. Now, there's lots of these little treatment places, and they were giving out the treatment at that time. These places still exist, and they have certain people that work inside them. Anyway, Carl went over to Tesco's one day, and he bumped into one of the people that work in the place that was giving out the treatments. Now, this person knew Carl for years. Now, I'm not on about 10 years. I'm on about probably 30 years, this person, because he used to come down to another area where Carl lived, and he was a locum doctor, so he used to travel around. So Carl had seen him at different areas. Carl moved later on in his life to another area, like 50 odd miles away, to just to settle down. And Carl still saw this same person because he'd known him for years, right? So anyway, so Carl goes over to do his shopping one day, and he bumps into this person that used to work at this place, and because all the people that was giving this treatment at that time, they suddenly disappeared, and then they were replaced with different people, all in the same building that worked there. The whole lot just disappeared, and then, after the treatments were given, or Carl's and everybody else's that went in there, and then replaced by new people that work there. Right. So anyway, Carl saw one of these people that worked there before, and he looked at Carl as if to say, and it was like the shock in his eyes, as if to say, how are you still alive? Oh no, what are you going to do? Oh no, how did you pull what out? And it was pure shock, horror on this person's face, and disbelief, and like I said, if probably Carl didn't have the companion that he had at that time, and he would have probably asked for extra help and may not have been here. But anyway, like I say, he saw this person, and then he went and collected what he had to collect, and he had to walk back past this person. That's when Carl said, "Hello, DR." And DR looked at him again with astonishment and couldn't really say anything. Just went, anyway, so Carl his health started getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse very, 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 very quickly. And then Carl starts getting some pains on his right hand side. And when Carl went to bed, this has been going on for about, I don't know, probably 2 years, before Carl started to really feel the pain. Now, apparently the pain was like a stabbing pain as it got worse, right inside him on his right hand side. So Carl couldn't really rest or sleep on his right hand side because it would make him very, very uncomfortable when he'd be coughing and struggling. So Carl had to always sleep on his left hand side. This was after that treatment. Alright, so then Carl has to have these scan things done. These, let's call them hospitals. Yeah, so he had to have this these scans done at this hospital. And anyway, so he goes to the hospital, and one of them is a colour scan. This one they want this time. So okay, he's had this one, and then sitting there waiting for, for some sort of person to ring him and tell him, whatever, or, And then he gets a letter that comes through. Now, on that letter, it tells him that he's got something else wrong with his lungs as well that he needs to breathe with. This begins with the letter C. Now, that was another big thing that was in these treatments that a few people knew of beforehand, but the majority of the people wouldn't listen because they were too fixed on these group of charlatans, liars, just unthinkable, unsoulless people. But sadly, all the people that lived on this planet, well, let's say a good 90% of them believe these people because they watch this or listen to this thing that comes out of these boxes they have in their homes, and it comes out and they listen to it and they believe it. They're so took in by it. They're all rationality and rational thinking goes way out the window, and they become obsessed by regurgitating the information that comes out of these information devices, or should I say false information devices. So of course most of the people are against anybody that hasn't had this poisonous treatment, but as the years progress, a lot of the like I say, the people that were pointing fingers and the people that were calling names and everything else, a lot of them start getting ill. And then the story turns round to, but Carl never ever got a sorry or anything like that. He just had to live with what he did get. No apologies, nothing. Yes, he did get an apology for his mum. She did apologise, but bear in mind his mum's very, very ill as well. She has the C thing as well. She had something called Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is apparently like a leukemia, and she had to recently go to the hospitals and stuff for scans on her stuff as well, and to see if it's gone to her bones, because it's yeah, she was getting very, very ill from what I'd read. Yeah, so anyway, like I say, she came with Carl to this place, this hospital place, when he had his another test done, because she wants to go with him. So anyway, so Carl said to her, okay mum, listen, you can come with me, but please, you've got to understand that I'm going to ask some questions, because I've got a lot of information and I want answers. So Carl's mum was sort of like, oh, okay, but all right then, okay, I'll come with you. Yeah, so anyway, Carl's mum's gone with him. Carl's asked this, this person who works at this place. Now, Carl's got some things with him. These meta things, yeah? And he's got this other thing as well. Now, anyway, he doesn't say anything, Carl, when he goes into the room, and, he asks these questions after the testing's been done, and he's got a witness next to him, but Carl wants further than that. He wants more. So, anyway, when he goes to this place, like I say, she sort of talking to him after the testing and everything else, and he's galloping along in this illness that should not be possible. But anyway, like I say, Carl asked these questions and he got the answers, the exact answers that he knew. Carl was right all along, right from the very start, and his mum, who very, very close to him, she knew, and it must made her feel terrible. It really, really must. And that wasn't Carl's intention. That was why Carl said to his mum, look, do you really, really want to come to this? Because I'm going to be asking some very, 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 some very, very important, in-depth, questions, and he wanted answers for them questions. Now, Carl wasn't going to be rude. He wasn't going to be arrogant or disrespectful, but he was pretty clever when he wanted to use his brain, put it that way, and his vocabulary could improve depending on the person that he was speaking to, depending if Carl thought that person was on the right level. Otherwise, Carl would stay at the level that he was, say pretending to be, because he didn't want to come across as too clever, too this, too that, because otherwise people have opinions on everything. So Carl had to be cautious, and this goes back from a very, very, very early age. But anyway, like I say, that's another story, but like I say, so this one, his mum came with him, she'd just found out, and his mum must have felt terrible, absolutely terrible. So he rang the other parent and told the other parent. Now, before this all happened, Carl had to send proof to the other parent, who lived far away, that he was ill and how ill he was, and also this other thing, because the other parent had been in a job which it makes people not suspicious, but they want to know the very in-depth on everything, and if they don't get everything in depth, then they're not gonna believe everything until they see evidence, let's say, of everything. It was in one of them jobs, yeah. So of course his life revolved around that, but all of the people worldwide, even whatever jobs they was in, even things like that, yeah, they would still believe these boxes that were put in their houses that give out this information. They'd believe that, but they wouldn't believe a very, very close family member, which, that upset Carl as well. But like I say, that's why Carl took the decision to have this treatment, in knowing that what it was going to do, because Carl couldn't see a way out of it. So, that was the only way that he could prove his point. So he had to put his life on the line, and he knew that this was going to be the outcome. And yeah, so anyway, so he goes back as well. So Carl, like I say, had the person admitting it fully, a person who works at this place. Right, so anyway, that's the end of the first book. Right, so then there's another book, yeah. Now this is called Conspiracy Theory by Carl, yeah. Now, there's this place out in Georgia, in America. It's called, there was a thing that was built up there a few years back, apparently. I've never been there myself, so I've never seen it. But it was called the Georgia Guidestones. And it was about, like I say, this is another story, so you just have to take it with that pinch of salt. Yeah? This is another story, so it's for entertainment purposes only, okay? Not meant to be taken seriously, right? So anyway, there's this place called Georgia in America, yeah? So, yeah, right? And had these stones. Now, not just normal stones, they were made by master stone masons. Yeah, that's where they were chiseled out. Right, they were put on these things in all the languages that was most used from, you know, for all around this whole place where everybody lived. So all the different languages, and it was put in there that basically that by 2030, well, it didn't actually give a date. Sorry, it just no, yeah, sorry, that's another story. It just said by you know, future things that should make where these people live, because the place where these people were living was apparently becoming very, very unstable. You know, strange weather and things like that, because these people that told people these stories about this strange weather that people was experiencing. The weather was real, okay, but it was being engineered by the people that used to speak through the same sort of boxes that Carl was talking about in his book, okay? Right, so, right, these boxes, yeah, were being used again, like I say, right? So, right, so, yeah, so the Georgia Guidestones, as they were called, right, they had this writing in all different languages, main languages from every different, you know, continent from around the world, from around this place. So anyway, like I said, it said that because the place where everyone was living was becoming unstable, because it was becoming unstable because the people that were making it unstable. So really, it was all fabricated. It was all fabricated because these people are very, very evil, right? And they wanted to get rid of the majority of the people. They wanted literally only 500 million people or thereabouts. 500 million people was an estimated number for making the place where everyone was living, because it was, you know, acting very, very strangely, the seasons. So, of course, all these people had to go. That sort of go. Yeah? So, not like pack your suitcases and here's a plane ticket, go. Yeah, it was go, you ain't coming back, you ain't going nowhere, basically, apart from either up there or down there. Yeah? Anyway, so, yeah, so. Anyway, right, so sorry, this is hard though. Right, yeah, this is really, really hard. But, so, yeah, anyway, this information was still coming through. So, like I say, through these square boxes, so Carl had to think and, you know, assess things and you know, plan things and, you know, try and change things, and like I say, but Carl was stubborn. I'm using the same name, right, for both books, okay, just in case, yeah, and that way you know that's why I can remember it then, because, yeah, it's, like I say, unreal, and, you know, all fabricated and all for entertainment purposes only, yeah, so let's use that name, like it isn't anyone. Right, so anyway, Carl has done lots and lots of research. So these Georgia Guidestones have got down all the different languages from all around the world. Now, on it says that to maintain a safe place for everybody, they needed to get rid of, bear in mind there was over 10 billion of these let's call them people, yeah, or yeah. Actually, no, just in case Google blocks me away, let's call them sheeple, right? So there was 10 billion plus sheeple that was all grazing happily, but there was these stones. Now this goes back to the first copy of the first story that I just explained. Okay, these stones, this is why Carl knew what he knew, because he'd done lots and lots and lots of research about everything and everywhere, right? So, jack of all trades, master of none, but different areas, yeah? So anyway, so Carl decided to, like I say, he knew what was on these stones, right? Now, magically, the more people that got to know about these Georgia guide stones, let's call them that, yeah? Like, apparently, well, one day, they went boom, and disappeared. But people, because lots and lots of people were going there, filming it and putting it on the, on these boxes, so people could see then. Now, certain other people that was in control of well, they felt they was in control of everybody else, the ones that speak through these boxes and show visions through these things they called to tell a vision, which they needed a remote to use the channeling for the programming to watch a vision on the boxes, right? Yeah. Right, so anyway, right, so Carl was these stones went boom one day, right? Now Carl had already researched what he knew, so he already knew what he knew. Now, like I say, on these stones, they specifically said in every different language that they needed to stop this place, and this whole place where everyone lived, over 10, maybe 11, 12, maybe billion people lived happily, sort of, in this massive place, yeah? So the powers that be that spoke through these boxes that are sadly 90% of the sheeple believed, they wouldn't believe in these guide stones either. And because they was getting noticed more, somebody magically got rid of them. But there's a capsule or something apparently buried around this part, and nobody knows where it is, and there is no dates and things like this, right? But apparently there's this capsule hidden somewhere with the truth in it. Right, so anyway, it sounds to me like, this story, from what I've read in this book, yeah, it sounds to me like these people that are in charge of these boxes and everything else, they plant this sort of thing, so it wouldn't be hard for them to plant something in the next chapter or the next book that comes out, if I find out, that, or Carl says about, that there's a thing that was buried or whatever, then Carl would have known, but anyway, that's for another chapter, okay, in another book, right? So, like I say, so Carl knows about this thing that was buried, and telling other people. Now, he didn't quite get a following that he was trying to get, because he was trying to get the words out and trying to not use flashy stuff behind him and everything else. And so, he couldn't get many people to follow him or to listen to him, because they thought, that he didn't have all this flashy stuff and everything else. He was just trying to get the truth out, and but because of that changed his direction, and until this other place come out where Carl could speak through this box thing and get seen, and Carl managed to get nearly 12,000 followers, well, just over 12,000 followers, so people listening to Carl. So 12,000 odd different sheep were listening to Carl. Well, these are people listening to Carl. It was obviously the sheeple that wasn't. But anyway, like I say, so Carl, tried as much as he could to get as much truth out as he possibly could on that channel. It was called Tit Flop or something like that. I'm sure it's called Tit Flop, something like that. But anyway, it got Carl up to 12,000 people, and then just pulled the rug from underneath his feet because he was talking so much stuff, you know, that you shouldn't be talking about. And he had been warned lots and lots of times, but Carl wanted to get as, you know, his point and opinion out to as many people as possible, because there's more to come, as you'll find out. So Carl was trying to get as much as he could out, but like I say, he kept getting the rug pulled from underneath his feet. So he lost one of that channel, so therefore he was left with only his, he called it, I think it was Poo Lube or something, and the other one, Tip Flop. Well, anyway, he carried on, like I say, on both of them and restarted them, but things are going very, very, very slow. On one of them, there's just over 1,000 people. Because, yeah, that was one thing that was in the book. In this place where he lived, with all the other sheeple and people and whatever else, there was like a thing that was called influencing or something. Now, when you got over a certain amount, I think it was 10,000 people, when you got over that mark of 10,000 people, you then become a threat to these people that was controlling these boxes. Sounds quite futuristic, the story, doesn't it? Yeah. Anyway, so Carl, because he got over 12,000 and was heading to nearly high numbers, like I say, they immediately shut that channel down. So Carl had to start again. So Carl has a couple of other channels. He now has 2 sister channels on Tip Flop and another one on this thing called Lulube. Right? So Carl's still trying to get out as much as he possibly can, truth-wise, from his perspective and from what he's known and from how many times he has been correct, and, you know, he's trying just to do good. You know, he didn't want money, didn't ask people, because so many people were using these places. They were saying, oh, if you want like this and that and the extras, you had to pay. And Carl never asked, not once, throughout his whole of his time doing this, never asked for 1 penny off anybody. All he wanted was people to listen. This is why Carl couldn't invest in everything else and didn't all that flashy stuff to gather people in, because he was never had the agenda of asking people for money or whatever for extra content and things like that at a later time. No, Carl was more honest, and he just wanted to give this out for free. That's why he couldn't improve on, you know, his studio equipment and things like that, because he just didn't have the money to do so. Well, anyway, so Carl carried on, and like I say, he tried, and he kept getting these so-called channels, yeah, for channeling information. He kept getting them shut down, but Carl still manages, even apparently today, it said in the book. Even today, right, he's got 2 channels on Tip Flop and 1 channel on Lulube. Apparently it's Conspiracy Carl or something on Lulube, and apparently something like Calico 369 on Tip Flop, but just put around different ways. But yeah, so there's 2 on Tip Flop and 1 on Lulube. So he's still trying to get out as much as information as he can, especially about the Georgia Guidestones, because in this book he says about these stones and says how they got, you know, suddenly disappeared once they started getting noticed by too many people, and too many people started coming up with videoing stuff, and some people come up chipping little bits away for memories or, you know, for whatever. There was too many people showing interest. So whoever or whatever, apparently just bang, and it just went and disappeared overnight. Yeah, and so anyway, and it's never ever been rebuilt. Not in the book anyway. It doesn't say it was ever made up again. Right. Well, anyway, like I say, on this thing, it said that there needed to be only 500 million sheeple left. Now there was probably 12 billion people, not million, billion people that lived on this place. So that means 6 out of 7 sheeple had to go to the butchers, if you get what I'm saying, yeah? So, yeah, and that, Carl used these boxes because Carl was quite intelligent enough to know that you could get the information out of these boxes as long as you programmed the right information into them, then you would get a different answer. So if you was asking a question, for instance, as long as you didn't ask the question one way, if you ask the same question but lots of different ways of asking that same question, you would get sometimes a different answer. So Carl knew this anyway. So Carl used this thing called, let's say, AI, yeah? So let's say that. So Carl used different AIs, different ones, not the same ones. And anyway, Carl asked, like what I said, the same question, but lots of different ways. And then Carl found out that by supposedly 2030, yeah, that they want that sort of figure. So, like I say, that's 6 out of 7, and then Carl sort of realised, and it all sort of set in all at once, and this was like as it comes along with the first sort of with the first book that I just told you about. This was where it all sort of comes together. So it's quite a very, very good book. So you want to get your friends and that to listen to this and share it, because it's not in any, you won't find it, it's not in any bookshop or anything, because I don't think it was ever publicised. You know, I just managed to get a copy from his very, very, very good friend that only I know, yeah? So I was very fortunate in that way, yeah? Anyway, so, right, Carl knew about these George Guidestones, right? And Carl knew exactly what was going to happen. Like I say, he asked this, I say artificial intelligence, whatever. He asked this thing, the same question, lots and lots of different ways. And then that's when he got the answer that the powers that were speaking through these boxes were planning on getting rid of the majority of the sheeple that lived where they are. They were only going to keep only the sheeple that would do exactly what they were told. If anybody was deemed to maybe or just a way, you know, how can I, a waste of space, taken too much of this thing that they had on this place called oxygen in the air, yeah? And say if these sheeple breathed too much of it, they was deemed waste, so they had to get rid of them, yeah? For, of course, this place to get better, yeah, apparently. So these powers, that talk through these boxes, they concocted lots and lots and lots of different stories and lots of conflicts, and you know, because people in this place were sometimes they had different coloured skin, so they used that, and they had different beliefs that were handed down by the same people that spoke through these boxes and stuff. But because they'd done that and they made different people from different places believe in different things. So of course when the sheep will come together, they couldn't get along and they'd argue about this and that, and no, he's right, no, that's right, no, this is wrong, that's right, this is right. And that's how it was, because these boxes, this is where I said about the television, yeah, programming, yes. Apparently, say about, I don't know, say about 80 years before Carl was born, there was this big, massive fight on this place. Yeah, they involved the whole of the place, and everybody was fighting each other. So then these people decided to use these boxings, but not just the boxings you could hear. No, they wanted to invent a boxing that people could see, and then that's where they could channel their programming, yes, through the television things, these square things. So this is what's happening in the book that I've been reading, and yeah, it's very interesting, especially when you sit back and, you know, fully read the book and understand it. You know, it's great. It really is. It's not great when you know what Carl's had to go through and how he was sort of persecuted a lot of his early ages, because he had another, how would you call it, a sibling amongst the sheeple that he was brought up in. He had a sibling that wasn't the same as Carl, and the older sibling, he told many untrue things and caused lots of problems and done some unspeakable things. But so of course people thought that Carl was the same, or nearly the same, or certain people, not everybody, but just certain people thought he was a little bit maybe like him, or a slight bit, or not to trust him fully because he could be a tiny bit like him. But Carl was nothing like him. Carl was the total opposite. Okay, there might have been a fraction of Carl that looks like him, but the inside, Carl was pure. But he'd been persecuted so much by one side of, you know, who was in the pen, that he was, you know, on the farm. He was, yeah, he was treated, you know, not unfairly, because he's, well, you know, both parents were very good, but they both done different things, you know. One was loving and things like that, and, you know, contacts, you know, a couple of times every day, and making sure that Carl was all right. And the other parent, you know, had to reach out to his elder. You know, it wasn't so much the other way around, yeah. So, and the other parent, the other sheeple elder was, like I say, he was in a job where it made him very cautious to what anybody was saying, because, you know, the majority of the sheeple that he spoke to were, of course, bad people, and it was his job to get to the bottom of the truth, and then to send them to this place, and then they get, you know, a further thing there, and that to go to wherever. But anyway, that was his, you know, one of his elders. So of course, Carl was tarnished with the same brush, and always had to prove himself, always, 100%. If he didn't, wasn't believed. If he ever asked for help or whatever, no, it weren't happening. Not from both. No, again, one tried as much as, you know, as she could, but the male one, you know, he was more sort of, you know, you've got to stand on your own 2 feet, and he did look after Carl. I'm not saying he was bad to Carl. In the book, he mentions quite a bit, you know, about how one of the parents, you know, he had, you know, more money and things like that. So he could, of course, you know, he did treat Carl to a couple of things, like, you know, a couple of cars when Carl was very young, and yeah, and, you know, so, and Christmas presents and things like that. But, you know, as far as if any other help had happened because of Carl's sibling, because Carl's sibling took lots of money from the father, you know, sheep. And he took lots of money from his mum, and that's unthinkable because she was elderly. And so anyway, like I say, Carl sort of got not treated the same, but he was questioned straight away, and that hurt. It was very, very painful because Carl was like, "What, all these years and you still don't." And so yeah, that stuck with Carl, and so he carried that on the board, and he's carried on. Like I say, the COVID, COVID, what am I talking about? Sorry, the thing that came out in the boxes that scared everybody. Sorry, that was a slip of the tongue. Sorry, that was, it was the same sort of thing all over again. Carl had to prove everything beyond a doubt, even giving his own life. That's what it took. That's the morals of this story. But Carl found out towards the end of it, there was lots and lots of witnesses, lots and lots of different people that all sort of came forward after it was too late. So, like I say, Carl's still waiting to this very day, but doesn't have too long left. But he's still living out and trying to, get by day. He's certainly not rich, and certainly hasn't got money, and things like that to enjoy his last bit of time. But hey, I have to be grateful for the air that I breathe and each day that I get to breathe it. Whilst other people get to enjoy luxuries and do what they want and go where they want and things like that, Carl still has to struggle, even though he tried to help as many people as he humanly possibly could. And Carl never begged, and he still wouldn't to this day. And he still, he had asked on the odd occasion, but was turned down, straight away by one of his, who he saw his parent, I suppose, and one of them, would never, ever, ever dream of helping, especially us. So that stopped Carl from ever asking, and made Carl very, very cautious. But it was his life with minimal, and he has lots of things objects that he lives with that might be worth money, but he's only done that for one reason, because he was trying to gain stuff to leave to his siblings that he's sort of, got, and he's leaving stuff for them. So when he passes on, because he hasn't got money and stuff, he's trying to leave them as much as he can by doing it that way. So Carl has no money whatsoever, and Carl certainly wouldn't go begging, and he says he hasn't done proud whole of his life, but that's the moral of the story, okay? So, like I say, these are two books, very, very, very good books, and very, very, very close to life. But the author of that book carries the same initials as myself, strangely enough. It's weird. But anyway, like I said, just a story that I wanted to get out there. This is the longest video that I've ever made in my history of doing this, and I was probably doing YouTube at least probably 15 to somewhere between 15 years, I'd say, and TikTok for the last 7 or 8 years. So he's been trying. He has been really, really trying. But like I say, this is the longest video that I've ever done in all of those years myself. Okay, this is the longest video for any of my for any of my career, and like I say, for any of my I suppose you call it a hobby, wouldn't you, really? Because I'm not earning money from it, and like I say, I wouldn't ask for any money either. It's just rude. And this is what upsets me when other people do that. Yeah, because you can do it. And this is the moral to the story. You can do it. You don't need a flashy studio and shit like that. As long as truth is coming out of your mouth, that resonates and people believe that then. But you have to say it correctly. Them books taught me a lot about that. You know, if you don't speak to certain people correctly, they will not listen. You know, you have to literally put it in, a dot to dot, and then work it out for yourselves. Sadly, I don't know if it's due to microplastics or what it is, but there's something in the air. Anyway, like I say, this is the longest story I've ever told, and probably one of the hardest that I've ever actually had to do. And I had no script or anything, obviously. But I put it into as best order as I could. If you have got all the way through, you seriously are a good, kind person, and I love you, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, and thank you. And I mean that. Because like I say, I learned nothing from this, and you'll gain nothing apart from the knowledge and love that's come from someone that really has gone through a hell of a lot, and he's still trying, okay? So anyway, love, peace, unity to every single one of you. Tanner Cole, also known as Conspiracy Cole, on TikTok and on Lulu. Love, peace, unity to every single one of you. I'm out.